people wake up one day and say, oh, God, you know what I want to do? I'm really bored with life. I really
Right.
just want to go to another country, be treated like crap, never see the people I love again, potentially never see them again, maybe die on the way there, potentially die on the way there. Do you think anyone in their right mind wake and seeks this? Because sometimes the anger is so potent that I feel like we think that we do this for pleasure, or that this is like we're just bored with life and we want to really annoy you.
Going back to that, the idea of trauma not being like talked about in your community or um, acknowledged as trauma. When did
Mhm.
you figure that out for yourself? Like, did you, is that something you do think about when you think about like now? And
Um,
how did you get there?
Therapy. I didn't. I did not think that me coming to this country undocumented at 9 years old, and the experiences that came from that, and experiences that led up to that, were traumatic. I didn't even know. To me, if anyone ever asked me, like, if I ever been to trauma, like, I think right away, like, I don't know, seeing someone die in front of you, or, like, like, again, just things that I didn't even, until the therapist talked me through it. And it's like, oh, like, and even just finding the root to a lot of my anxiety is entrenched in my experiences as an undocumented person. And it's so in front of you. It's like right here, right? So you can't see it. It's right here all the time in front of you. So you're always like, yeah, I'm fine. Everything's fine, And then someone pulls it back and you're like, oh, that's what's been happening. I didn't have the language for it too. That's the other thing. Like, you don't grow up with the language for it. My sister, when she was very young, 5, 6, had a full-on blown out panic attack. And the doctor, so this happened while we were driving, took her to the nearest clinic because we thought she was having a heart attack, but didn't make sense because she was 5 years old. And the doctor did all, like, it was a clinic, a community clinic, but we treated her like it was the ER because we thought she was dying on us. She couldn't breathe. She all of a sudden, like, could not breathe. And then the doctor took all her vitals, everything was fine, and then pulled my dad and I aside. And my sister is 10 years younger than me, so I was old enough to hear this from the doctor, and was like, she just experienced an anxiety attack and blah, 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 blah. And my dad and I were just like, what is that? I don't get it. Okay. And then, so those are even the first time we even heard of that. And then finding out that it was nothing physical, we're like, oh, okay, so we just have to be really nice to her, buy her ice cream, hug her, and tell her everything's gonna be all right, and then we move on. But no, that's not what we should have done. But we don't have, when you don't have the language for it, you don't have the capability. I had panic attacks. I passed out from a panic attack once, and I didn't know that that's what it was. So it's just insane that you just deal with it. You survive it. You do what you do with everything that's in front of you. It's a challenge. It just needs to be overcome. That's it. And you keep going. And you don't realize that that's just keeps getting bigger until, and I don't want that to happen to my people. I don't want it to get to a point where they can't handle it. There's already so much that it's really hard to handle. I don't want it. I don't want that to be the norm, to be like, it's so big, then that's when you address it, when it's already like bigger than you ever thought it could be. So,
Well,
yeah,
and
therapy.
it seems like you had to deal with like, this is when you weren't telling anybody that you're an undocumented, where it's like, this is who I am, this is who I really am, and it's like living the two different lives on top of all of that trauma,
Hmm.
and on top of, like, that's
Right.
got to be super confusing.
Yeah, it was definitely, parents were very, very, and I get why they were uh cautious about everything. So even at a young age, we were told, like, don't tell anyone your status. Like, don't tell anyone, because again, family separation is a big fear in my community, because it happens to a lot of us, where the parents get deported and the kids stay here and they can't figure out. And then, my dad would be like, we might, I don't, like, it was his biggest fear to lose his children. um and so he was like, don't tell anyone you're undocumented, blah 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 blah. But again, in doing that and being very frank about the whole situation at an age where I didn't understand what was happening. It created a lot of confusion. And then as I got older, yeah, it's a lot of, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. And so keeping my facade of like, and like all my friends getting their licenses at 16, and they're like, oh my God, where's your license? And I'm like, oh, cars scare me, and just coming up with dumb reasons, and like, and like people doing, I'm gonna go to you know Europe for the summer or whatever. I don't know. Or I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. Like my school trip, my French class went to Paris for summer or for like spring break, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're doing so well in French. Like you should come. Why aren't you coming?" And I'm like, "Oh, and like always just being very flippant about it because like the reality was so different. And again, you're right. It creates a disassociation when you create these two identities. When she talks about the I think it was Francisco who was in the church who was hiding out in the church while they were when ICE was basically ready to deport him or whatever, and the kids, the disassociation that the kids were dealing with, I was like, oh my God, that is it's yeah, it's there's so much to it, there's so many layers to it, that again I haven't even uncovered all of them. I'm still working through them, but I first became aware of them through therapy.
Like, I wonder if I was in that position, if I would just lie to my kid and not even tell them that they were undocumented. Like, I don't know.
And see, here's the thing. I was gonna say that's so interesting you said that. And then there's kids who don't find out until they're 16 when they do go to the DMV and try to get a license. But that's a huge load of trauma too. I knew someone personally who actually wrote a whole web series about it. It's called Annie Undocumented. I don't know if it's online or not, but and she wrote a web series about it. Originally wrote it. She's fantastic. And because that's what happened to her. She was like living her normal American teenage life and was like, oh, it's time for me to get a license. And it's like, no, you can't. And there's a downfall from that too, though, right? Like, so there's no, and I get it. Our parents are just doing the best that they can. And I don't know
what I would. Evil.
I don't know. I don't know either. I don't know either. I don't know the answer because
no.
But I think you can still pick up on the general anxiety, and then you probably would have that weird effect of, I know something's wrong, but I can't figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So it's like even worse in some
and kids are perceptive.
Yes.
Yeah. And kids are perceptive. Very perceptive. I think I was way more perceptive when I was younger than I am now. Like I picked up on things way more keenly than I do now. Now I'm like, huh? What? But I don't know how. I don't know what's the right way. And that's the thing. It's like figuring out, like, if I was in my parents, and the therapy has helped me see that too. It's like, if I was in my parents' shoes, I know it, even through all the things that I'm like, oh, my parents did this and that, whatever. It's like, no, every turn and everything that they did was to make, like, they were just working with what they had and they were doing their best, doing their best at all times. So, understanding that too, and working through that. Cause I know there's a lot of love for our parents, but I know that there can be resentment, and I'm just being very honest, and working through that too, of what that means, because I don't know what I would have done. I really don't. I don't know if I could. My parents were in their 40s when they picked up and left everything they knew, so I don't know if I can't even think of that now. I'm like, what? How would I just do that? Like, how do you just, like, things have to be really bad for you to say, buy everything I know and everything I love. I have to go look for something better. And it's not even for yourself. You are going very well aware that it's not going to be better for you. It's just so that it can be better for your kids. Like, to me, that's like, I don't understand why they should give medals to every immigrant parent, opinion, like, as they cross border or come from, a flight, whatever they do, the way they come in, through sea, through land, air. I just think it's the most selfless act of bravery to say, the next few years, or maybe the rest of my life that I have left in this life, are going to be hell, but it's all so that my kids can never experience what I went through. or will never know that kind of pain. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if I could do that. Like, I'll be honest, I don't know.
But then that's got to be hard as being the kid. You have that then on your shoulders.
Yeah.
And then also
Same
with the
for-
expectation of you're supposed to then take care of your parents.
Yeah.
And it's like, I already go to therapy. I haven't lived up to my parents' expectations. It's nothing near that, you know?
And also, I just imagine that the reality of America, I mean, pre-internet, or like now, I guess things a little bit different. But I just imagine people's perception, if they've never come to America or gone, I'm not in America right now, so like, they've never gone to America, and their circumstances are dire, but the reality of what it's like to live in America, I'm sure, is not at all what they were expecting. I mean, inevitably. Also, I just kind of want to ask you about your parents and how they feel about that. But one thing that struck me about the book was she did talk about how so many people in that book still wanted their bodies to be sent back to their countries.
Yes.
Even though they had lived in America for decades,
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, and I think to me, that's also the other thing about the word dreamers and of the American dream, like dismantling that idea of the American dream. But for you and your parents, I mean, like, do you talk to your parents about that and about their expectations, and how do they feel?
About what to do when they die specifically?
Well, no, just more in terms of like, how do they feel about it? You said they're from Mexico. Like, how do they feel about Mexico versus how do they feel about America? Like, how do they feel about their identity?
I think it's a very complicated question. It's interesting. I know, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I don't know if I can fully answer for them because I can only have snippets of conversations of us even going into that topic, because it is hard to talk about, to again, it's one of those conversations where you have to be very vulnerable, and part of sort of the conversation around mental health, right? It's about vulnerability, and you're already going through so much on a day-to-day basis where you have to keep your walls up to get through the day, that it is hard to then just sort of like put them down to talk about anything that is difficult to talk about. So I can't specifically say that I have the perfect answer of what both the think about it, but I just, from seeing them navigate all of this, and it's really complicated. I mean, I know that they are very grateful for what this country has done for both my sister and I, and the opportunities that both her and I have, and the things that we have been able to accomplish here. But I know that I know my dad specifically, I think my mom has just gotten more used to, like, wherever her family is, like her daughters and her husband, like she's like, she makes the best of it, she gets used to it, she's a person of habit. Like, once you establish what the routine is, okay, cool, we're good to go. But I know my dad struggles more with not having seen his family in many in decades, and the thing you struggle with the most. My mom just doesn't talk to me about as much about her feelings, so maybe she doesn't feel this way, but she just hasn't shared it with me. But I know, like with my dad, we've talked about how hard it is to lose people you love and not to be able to be there, and like that's like a really, really, I know, like the hardest hit for him was when his mother passed away, and not being there for any of it leading up to it, funeral, anything, and to this day still not having gone to her grave to pay his love and respects. And so there's things like that where it definitely messes with your identity, because it messes with your heart, so your emotions, like what it means to be a good son, to be a good brother, to be, but then you kind of put those roles, you sort of diminish those roles to be a good father, right? So I know that it's like, yes, I'm a great father in this respect, but oh my God, I've been a terrible son. So I know those are things that he is, untangling and dealing with, and I know there's a lot of guilt around it. I think either way, you kind of can't escape the guilt. And I think that's part of what's really hard about sort of living this life, that there's, unfortunately, there's there's a consequence to everything, obviously, and so there's ramifications whichever way you decide to move forward. So,
Right.
and you know, I know it is hard to, you know, my dad has definitely faced discrimination and been talked to certain ways, and so that's dehumanizing to deal with. To like, no, I'm a good person, and to this day he'll still have me be like, can you call, because I have an accent, and sometimes people get an attitude when I have an accent, like, can you call, like, can you, you know, he still feels like he can never. My dad is speaks English very well, like he reads a lot, he's a very smart man, so like he even has vocabulary sometimes that I'm like, I know a lot of Americans don't. And I'm like, Dad, no, you speak English very well, you're a well-read man. And he's like, but I have an accent, so no, you know. So like, no, who cares about the accent? But he's like, you know, it's I can't even get him to understand that he to this day thinks he speaks English okay because of his accent, but his grammar, vocabulary is like incredible, and his diction's great, but he has an accent, so to him it's like, no, it's terrible. You know. So, and again, it comes from having been treated a certain way by, you know, different people because of his accent. It's like not I don't know. It's complicated, but yeah, you're right. There's the and again, I want my parents to go to therapy, so that's another thing that I'm trying to go
I was like,
through,
you're making
because
a real
it's
good
important.
case for
You know,
him to
Yeah.
go. Like dealing
Yeah.
with closure, dealing with all of these other things.
There's
Yeah.
so much, and that's
especially
the thing.
like,
It's like, how do you convince your parents? But yeah,
I mean, Karla did it. I'm saying her name
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. You
She
are.
managed to convince her parents. I was
Yeah,
really impressed with
I've
that.
I've made some strides, and I think I'm pretty close. I think I can convince my dad. My mom, I don't know. Again, I said creature of habit. Like, therapy is not part of her rituals, so she's like, why would I do that? So,
Well,
but my dad, I think I can convince. Yeah.
and I wonder if there's something like with you, was there something about becoming a resident that then allowed you to relax enough to be open to therapy? Because it's
Oh,
one
that's
less
a good
pressure.
question. That is a great question. I never thought of that. The reason why I did go to therapy is because I had a little bit of a, I don't even know what to call it, a breakdown. I don't know what the proper terms are for it, but I just I it was just really bad to the point my sister had to come with me and be with me for a few days because I was not mentally well, like should not be left alone, just not well. um and and maybe you're right, and again, I was able to find a place that was sliding scale. That was another reason why I was able to do it, because I couldn't afford it. I can't afford the regular price of a therapist. That's no.
I mean,
um
what normal
Even as a
person
resident,
can?
it's really hard.
It's
I
really
think
Yeah.
expensive.
sliding scale, thank God for sliding, because that's yeah. um so things had to get really bad, but you're right, maybe if was still undocumented or DACA, I might have been like, even if when it got really bad, maybe I would have been like, oh, you know what? I'll just figure it out. It's fine. It's fine. I'll deal with it later. You know, because it's more important that I get through this day as an undocumented person or as a DACA person than not. So I hadn't thought about it, but I'm sure it influenced. I'm sure it it helped, you know, in some way. So
And
yeah.
like I can imagine that it's another person that you're supposed to be vulnerable with, but it's somebody that you, if you're undocumented, would be afraid would turn you in.
And that's a great, so the therapist that I'm working with right now, bilingual therapist, it's one of the things that she addressed even in this webinar, that she's like, and I understand, and that's a lot of the ambivalence the community has towards therapists, is because, like, you, again, we have lived a life of keeping our walls up so high
Mhm.
to protect ourselves, to get day, to just survive, that it's really really hard to just all of a sudden bring him down with, and again, specifically to someone that you think is an authority. that is the last person you're going to open up to. So that's a great point you brought up, because that is one of the things that she brought up. And then speaking to her, she told me about that. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, had I been undocumented when I went to therapy, I don't know if I would have been so open about my feelings and been able to have the breakthroughs that I did. You're right, because you're scared. You're still looking over your shoulder, like, all the time. And so that is definitely another, and again, it's like another one of like the things to tackle within talking about mental health. It's like telling someone, and she's very like, in this webinar, she's like, we can't disclose any information to anyone unless obviously we think you're going to harm yourself or harm someone else. But other than that, like, we legally can't talk about what you tell us in therapy. So, but really having people understand that, I get it. It's hard because it's like, that's been the way you've survived. It's worked for you. Like, evidence shows that this has worked for you. To keep your walls up and not tell anyone to anything has worked. So why the heck would you all of a sudden be like, okay, it's cool, So yeah, it's another obstacle to all of this conversation and everything, around it.
So I had a question while we were talking before that I'm curious about, like, in terms of, have you now, since you've gotten residency, traveled, and have you been back to Mexico?
Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I traveled as soon as I was able to. And the first person in my docket is my one living grandma I have left, was to see her. That was like my first thing. It's like, gotta go see her.
Oh.
So it was weird. I I left. It was basically a 20-year difference that I had, and it's interesting because I didn't get to go back. So I was born in a city, it's called Cihuatanejo, and then, but I don't have any family there, so I didn't go back to where I was, which I on my bucket list. Of It's so weird because, like, to still have dreams about it almost feels like a past life, because it's like all these blurry memories of this place that I've yet to come back to. So I went to cities where I have family, which is not where I was raised, because my parents lived somewhere and then they just would travel to see their parents and their brothers and sisters. So I saw my grandma, and I saw aunts and uncles and everything, and it was just really weird to be back. And I actually ended up having a little bit of a weird little, yeah, I'm very sensitive, so I don't want to call it breakdown, but just like a little crying realization. It hit me that I was seeing it. Just, if I was like, this is what my life could have been. I was confronted with like what my life could have been, what my parents left behind, and there were good things about what my life could have been, and there were things that were not so good about what my life could have been. And so, like, dealing with all of that. And actually, I had just started therapy a few weeks before going to Mexico, so which was kind of good, I think, that I had started. And then when I came back, I got to keep going with therapy. So I think it was therapy kind of fit in perfectly in that journey. A lot of emotions, like a lot of emotions. And my aunts seeing me, and they're like, one of my aunts, like the first time, it was just a lot of tears, because like my parents haven't been back in a long time, obviously. So one of my aunts, like the moment she hugged me, was like, I feel like I'm hugging my sister right now. And so it was just like a lot of very huge emotional roller coasters of being again, like, you're a representation of your family, right? You're an advocate in this country as a kid of an immigrant. You're an advocate for your parents, right? The way she talks about, like, how in the book, she has been an advocate for her parents. The way she called that restaurant up when her dad was being mistreated, and pretended to be a British, or she said posh. I'm sorry, so I don't know if that necessarily means British accent, but but like the way you are, and I mean, her dad was not happy with it, but it's, you're always, in a way, you're a representative for your parents wherever you go, whether it's here and defending them and translating for them, or whether it's you are finally the person that can go see their family. Because really, you didn't grow up. It's weird to meet people that look like you that you've never met before in your life. It's like, what Oh yeah, no, I know I'm related to you. I don't know you. I don't know anything about you. It's strange to be like, oh, that person's your cousin, that person's your cousin, and then people that you do remember vaguely being like, oh yeah, wow, okay. It was a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster. Yeah.
When did you make that trip?
To 2017. So.
Wow.
Was there any like,
Oh, yeah.
because that was under the Trump presidency. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was there any feeling of anxiety that something, he would make a new rule, a new law, anything that would change that would, you wouldn't be able to come back?
Not necessarily about Trump, but I was very nervous when I was coming back. So LAX, they have the immigration or customs, or I don't know what it's called, like when you're coming back and you have to
Customs.
show all your paperwork.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, I was nervous because I was like, you're just so used to it. It's just there's like things out of your mind of how government work, and like the distrust, like you were saying, to government, and the distrust to authority, and the distrust, so like it was very, in coming back, I knew I was fine. I was with my husband, and so I was like, I know I'm fine, like I have proof, like that person married me and that's why I have this. But it still was really nerve-wracking to just be like, okay, all right, they could deny me, like it's, and I've traveled 3 times since, and it still feels like they might, maybe once I'm finally a citizen I won't feel like that, but as a resident I still feel like, and I think and I know that there's nothing wrong with it, like that, I know my stuff is legit, but you still have like that little thing in the back of your head that it's like,
I mean,
is this real though?
I don't know, because
So,
I was detained in Fort Lauderdale
oh
because
wow.
they couldn't understand my green card, because I have a green card stamp right now and I don't have the physical green card. So like
Oh
a lot of times I feel like, because the bureaucracy is so complicated and there's so many codes, they don't
Yep.
even know their own job. So sometimes they'll like put you in, I've been put in the rooms and I've like heard other people like saying, this is the process, this happens every time. And it's like, I missed my flight because of it. And they didn't have anything to ask me. They just didn't understand the code, like
Oh my
literally.
God.
So not to scare you more, but I'm just saying, like,
And
it's
you know
a
what?
legitimate
Again,
fear.
you're bringing up memories. The other reason I was scared is because my friend, who one of my friends I grew up with, who was basically, we're in the same trajectory. We both were undocumented growing up, and then it was like the one friend I could tell that we were. And I found her later in my life. I was like, huh, where were you earlier? So, and then
She was probably hiding too, though.
She was hiding, so I didn't know. We were both in our little rocks, like, oh, look at us. And then she became DACA the same time as I did. And then she also met someone she fell in love with who was a citizen. And so anyway, so we both followed the trajectory. So she got married a couple years before me. So she got to go to Mexico a couple years before me. And she got detained. She got questioned, and I can't remember what the issue was, but she was put in a room for hours and questioned. And she said it was so traumatic. It was so scary because she was like, I've done everything the right way. I played by your rules. What did I do wrong now? And I believe she was, I have to ask her if she was with her wife or not. But, again, it's still, I've done it. I have the paperwork. Like I paid the money, I paid the toll, I paid the $200. Can I just go, and not $200. Thinking Monopoly money, but anyway.
Yeah.
So
like immediately, like she's talking about Monopoly.
Yeah. It's like, that's not what I meant by that. Does not cost $200.
No way.
I wish. So yeah, I remember having that in the back of my head too, where I was like, okay, if this happens, like, again, you always are mentally preparing yourself for the future, which again is also the root of my anxiety, which I'm always like having to kind of have an idea of what the future is going to be, so you can have like a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, so it doesn't take you by surprise, so it doesn't knock you off your feet. So it doesn't, again, a survival mechanism, So I was like, okay, if this happens, like, who do I have a lawyer's number already ready to go, so it's, it doesn't go away right away. The fear.
I mean, I think it was funny, like in the book, in the beginning of the book, she talks about how, because Trump won and her friends were like wanting to hide her. And she was like, she said, who am I, Anne Frank? Like, what's going on? Like,
yeah.
And I thought it was kind of funny because,
Yeah.
she like goes through the book, you realize like all the trauma happened before Trump, but it's almost like people registered only when Trump came into office, the vulnerabilities.
Right. I mean, he heightened fears for us. I will definitely attest to that. He heightened,
expired it, right? Or because there was that entire thing where he expired it.
I know. I was DACA when he was came into office. So I was shaking in my boots. So yeah, I can attest to it. It's one of the reasons, my husband and I were like, you know what, let's just do this. And we had already been in a relationship. We knew we wanted to get married, but we sped everything up because of Trump. So because he said, I'm going to get rid of DACA, and both our sets of parents were like, you guys, this guy means business. Like, let's not wait and see if it happens. Let's just assume it's going to happen. And it did. He did. So it's and I was lucky enough to be in a relationship with someone that I love, that I knew I wanted to marry, and you wanted to marry me. But like, that was just luck, So to me, it's like, yeah, I got lucky. And again, the survivor skills, right? Like, I just happened to be lucky that I had that in my life, but easily could not have had it, and easily could have just been going through this DACA roller coaster that I know many are going through,
So what's the status of DACA now?
It's back, thankfully, because of Joe Biden coming back into office. And I know it's one of the things he took care of when he started. So I know it's back, and and that's the other thing. It's that I know, so I'm pretty sure, I hope because that's one of the things that I think this allowed it. And I'm not sure, I have to look it up, if the court sort of was like, no, you can't do that. So I don't know for how long he was an executive order though. So that's why he technically was able to say, I'm the president now, so I'm getting rid of this executive order. And I know that people were, obviously all the organizations, nonprofits, and were fighting him on it, and human rights organizations. But because it was a 2-year, so every 2 years you applied. And I know that it went down to 1 year, but I'm not 100% sure if that's because of the Trump administration, where basically he tried to get rid of it, he wasn't able to get rid of it, and I think we went back down to 1 year, which again, it's around, when I was doing it, and I'm sure the price might have gone up, it was around $700, and I just remember how hard I had to work to come up with $700 and something. Now imagine if you cut that by a year. So you had at least 2, and it comes up on you fast. 2 years come up fast in terms of money too, because you're surviving. You help, and then you have a little bit of a platform, so you're helping your parents, right? So you have a little bit of leverage, so you are helping your parents because they're getting older, and you're able to have a little bit of stability. So you're like, I'm going to help my parents. The 2 years comes up fast. So to knock it down to 1 year is brutal. So it actually, a lot of kids that are eligible, a lot of the times don't apply because it's the money. So that's one way to knock people out of it, because now you have that money and again, it's really less than a year, because it expires in a year, but you have to apply for it within like 3 months before it expires, something like that.
Yeah, and they take so long to do that stuff. Like, I know my green card has been postponed like 3 years because they still haven't gotten through the backlog. So that's why mine is still pending. So I can't even imagine if you're adding on these other, arbitrary deadlines.
Right.
That's probably why they're all locked up.
Oh my God, I know. Yeah, I went through that too. Where it was like, I got a letter saying like, we're really backed up, and so here's a letter saying that you're good for 6 months after it expires, because we don't have we don't have answers for you yet. I was like, okay, cool. And that was one of the times that I traveled that I was like, oh my God, please God. But so yeah, I have to actually, I want to say that Biden reinstituted it, and it's a 2 year. It's back to 2 years. I have to double check though, because I know at one point it was 1 year, which is not. It's still
It's
1
not
year is
enough.
brutal. It's
Right.
brutal because you barely just paid, and then even like the DMV renewal feels like, like something as small as that. I'm always like, oh, I have to pay this again. Taxes, oh man, it's taxes again. But so you're already doing all of that. You're already paying all of that stuff too. So and again, it's less than a year really, because like I said, you have to apply before it expires. So honestly, probably it's like 9 months really. So yeah.
It's like in Undocumented Americans, she talks about being in New York. Like I've lived in New York, I live in Los Angeles now, and I have issues making ends meet that I can't even imagine. And also taking
Right.
care of a family and then having to get, like, I don't have that extra 700. Like,
Yeah.
Right. And that's like, I remember reading somewhere that, the average not the average American, I shouldn't say that, but it's like the people, the working poor, right? We don't have usually don't have even $500, like a $500 emergency, basically. You don't have it.
I don't
It
think
would
that's
knock you out.
even, I don't think that's working poor. I think that's a huge percentage of Americans. Like,
Well, then
could be
never
like
mind.
40%.
Yeah.
mm-mm.
Right. It's like everyone right now, probably, except for
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
for the
I
top.
remember in New York, like I was trying to apply for the 80/20 housing, and I
Mhm.
fit in the homeless category. I wasn't even low income, like how much I made per year. And I was like, huh, okay,
Wow.
cool.
Wow.
So that just seems amazing that people are making it work being undocumented there. Because
Yeah.
I don't know
can't imagine.
how. I agree. My parents were not undocumented in a big city, so I can't speak to that. But I don't know. I think people are magicians. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's like I just don't get it. It's like it doesn't um make sense. And I did live in LA as an undocumented person. Um, but again, it was just me. I wasn't taking care of a family. So
Oh,
I
so
don't get it.
where do your parents live? Like which?
They're in Northern California. So
Oh, okay.
it's definitely, yeah. So it's definitely like not as, I mean, they're not in San Francisco, so that's a good thing.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, that's the San Francisco's insane, but it is a sanctuary city, so that's really good. But and my dad, does work in San Francisco a lot, so that makes me feel a little better. But because yeah, that's another thing you're always thinking about is deportation and in jobs that have had ICE raids before, and so it's very nerve wracking, and that's the other thing too. It's like oh, can you see me? I feel like
Mhm.
my internet. Okay, my
No, you're
internet just
good.
said it was unstable. I hate when it tells me it's unstable. It's like that's weird. So, uh, but yeah, and even like and again, it's speaking because she was talking about her brother in the book. Her brother is a
Right.
citizen,
Mhm.
and I think that's a whole nother conversation. She only brought him up a few times and how she felt like, you are the citizen, so you better make sure that you bring us through because I'm not going to be the only one who's going to do this. And I never had that conversation with my sister. But I'm like, I was thinking, and I'm glad she said, like, I apologize to him. I was like, good, because and I get her frustration. I 100% get it. But I think that's another thing. Like I actually was listening to Diane Guerrero. She has a podcast about mental health. Diane Guerrero, she's an actress, and
Right.
she was in Orange is the New Black.
Yeah,
And
I
she actually
remember
had,
her story.
yeah,
Yeah.
she actually had Karla on her podcast, and so I listened
Oh,
to that episode. And she's talking, mental health and in the Latinx community and in our community at large. And you know, um, she Diane Guerrero, her story is she's a citizen, and her parents when she was 14 and basically was separated from her family, and just the repercussions of that and her mental health. And it's just, her story is incredible, and how she has overcome that. And I just think about that too. It's like all the kids, all the citizen kids of these undocumented um, immigrants, Americans, the fact that there is also a lot of trauma that, even though I know, and I know just from my sister's experience, and again, she can speak to it obviously way more than I can, but just in my perception of how she's dealt with this, like, I know that even though she wasn't undocumented, her mentality was still that of an undocumented person. Meaning she was still had the fears of her parents being taken from her. She still was living under the poverty line. She still was, having to lie about things about her parents and about her sister, so she still had to have that mentality to survive it, to have the privilege of having her family be with her, right? You still have to live your life a certain way. And so there's also trauma attached to that, even if you are not, even if she's her as a citizen. And there's, I'm sure, guilt attached to that, of her being able to be the first one in the family that can actually get a license, and what that feels like. And only one in our family that can actually, she went to Mexico when she was 16, and she said that that trip changed her life, because she was like, it's really young, and I think we should have prepared her mentally for it, because she dealt with a lot of things that she didn't even know about her family that parents never tell us. I found out things about her family through her telling me things that, and so it's just, and it's again being that representative for your parents, but for her it's to a heightened extent, because she's a citizen and she has, what we consider privileges, and so she has to, and the thing is, she's had to be sort of like, when she was 18, being like the person that goes down on the paperwork, she's 18 now, and she's a citizen, and they can't take it from her. They can take it from my parents, but not from her, but that responsibility is a burden, and that carries, there's a weight to that I can't speak to. And so I know that there's a lot of kids like that I think, again, this affects all of us in different ways, but we're not talking about it, so it's just going to keep doing that. So
But do you talk to her about that?
yeah, definitely. I mean, her and I are very close. She's my best friend, and again, I think that's also just, I think we're lucky. I know siblings that aren't that close, that's not the case, but her and I thankfully are very close, and so we can talk about all of this stuff. We talk about mental health, we talk about, our family in various ways, and her trip to Mexico, like, she came back to me, and so her and I, she was able to decompress with me before going back to my parents, so it's just, but again, I know not everyone has that in their lives, so that's yeah. So it's just, it encompasses so many areas in people's lives, and that we don't even, and that there's ways that I know I don't know about, because I haven't lived it. So I'm learning too as I go along how the system is sort of affects all of us.
But is there any, so your parents right now, is there any path to citizenship for them?
No, there isn't at the moment. We thought there was, because of my sister turning 21, but then we hit a roadblock with something else in their profile. So at the moment, no. So right now, at the moment, we're praying that, I don't want to say we're praying, because I'm a little jaded about all of that. That, Biden, he said he was gonna, have a, whatchamacallit, sorry, sounds so
Amnesty?
stupid, whatchamacallit. Yeah, like a, immigration reform within the first 100 days.
Oh, okay.
I think it's been already 100, if not nearing to it. And it's hard, because it's like, obviously you want to have a little speck of hope just to keep you going through but I don't know. It'd be nice. I'd like to be surprised. I'd like to really be surprised, but I don't want to be dependent on that, because then I've learned, we've all learned the hard way that that's not a good idea. So
Yeah, I mean, hopefully something does happen, but it was when I was sort of trying to do some research, I was trying to see, like you're saying, the differences between Trump and Biden and Obama.
Mhm.
I couldn't really find anything just yet. I mean, he's reopening the child detention centers. So,
I know,
yeah.
right? Which I don't. That's not even a word that should exist. Childhood detention center. Like what? That doesn't. That's. Um, but yeah, I mean, and I will say though, Trump did hold up his word, and he was true to his word about dismantling DACA. So I would note that that's a huge difference.
That's a
You
difference.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
'Cause
also, I
definitely
do
know.
think there's like a huge thing about the separation at the borders thing, the children. That was the, but I'm just not clear what the difference is if there's child detention centers.
Well, what he did specifically, Trump, is that he created the again, like so separating children from their parents, and he did that as a way to deter from people coming here.
Right.
So because they would think, oh, well, they're gonna take my child away from me, so now I'm not gonna immigrate to the United States. But you don't understand, if you're escaping, you're running away from death, you're gonna take the chance, you know. And that's a
Mm.
terrible situation to be in. To say it's either death or hunger or famine, or, which is the same thing, or maybe not making it. Because, and again, I think it's what a terrible situation. Like if someone is willing to risk being separated from their child, that only speaks to what they're running away from. So
I mean, they're
it's
also
so
just
incredibly inhumane.
they're also the expectation probably in their minds is also they're risking death. I mean, also to I don't know, go through coyotes or like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it's not like the most safest way to
None of it is safe.
enter. So it's
No.
like that is not a deterrent. Like it doesn't make sense as one. Like you're
Right.
already risking your whole lives. So it's
Right.
just it's a little bit of a bizarre one, but yeah.
There's a documentary on Netflix about the immigration system, and I'll be honest, I wasn't able to get through all of it because it was really hard to watch. I just was like, I was crying too much through it that I just was like, oh, I can't. So I do have it's still on my list because I should uh, watch everything that has to do with immigration. But and it's I believe it was filmed during the Trump era, so you get to see the separate like the actual how it's happening, and it's monstrous. I don't know how people who worked at these agencies did it. I just don't understand. I would quit. I don't care how much money, just seeing you're literally tearing child apart from. And it's imagine, like, and I'm just thinking of all the kids who have been through this. Like, talk about the mental health, talk about the trauma. Like, that is, I don't even, it feels insurmountable to get through. And but the kids that are still in the system, that are too young to ID their parents, to eat, and the parents who can't, it's a violation against human rights in such like a disastrous, monstrous way that I don't know how we can ever recover from having done that as a country, personally, and not having
I
fought it
think
enough.
what worries me about this whole thing is like, yes, I think it was monstrous, but I think this idea of like, oh, but it was just Trump, like that kind of worries me. Like this idea of like, oh, there was only trauma because of Trump, and then now that it's Biden, we can just move on, like
Right.
nothing.
And that's the thing. It's like, don't look away just because you think the president in office is a decent human being, or not even a decent human being, but is not Trump.
Yeah.
Don't look away, because that is how these things keep happening. And I'm under my understanding that they're not doing the child separations anymore, but there's still kids in cages. Why are there cages? Like, why is that still how we're processing immigrants? A lot of people too. It's not illegal to seek asylum.
Right.
That's another like whole different topic that people don't understand. There's nothing illegal.
Yeah, you
Um,
can't. I think what people don't understand is you can't actually apply for asylum overseas and then come. You actually have
Correct.
to come
Correct.
first. And so,
Right.
therefore, you obviously have to go through a very harrowing
Mhm.
experience, to even get there.
Just to survive the arrival to the United States
Right.
is something most people would not even could
Contemplate
not
if they
even
had a
fathom.
choice. Yeah.
Right. Right. So
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's true. It's a lot. But I mean, also, you know, just having said that, it's not that every single undocumented, I don't want it to sound like every single undocumented person comes through the border that way. That's not
No,
true either.
I
Like, there's
didn't.
lots of
I
other.
didn't. I
Okay.
didn't. Yeah. I
Do
came
you
here through a
remember?
bus.
Oh, okay. Do you
Yeah,
remember
I
that
didn't.
journey?
Yeah, yeah. And I came here legally. So it's not that, I just overstayed my tourist visa.
Right.
So I was and actually that actually helped me when applying for my green card, because if you come here illegally, even if you're a 9-year-old person who has no say in the matter, um, if you I know people who got married to a US citizen, but they came here legally even as a child, right? And again, you have no say in the matter, you just are along for the ride. When you apply for a green card, you have to go back to Mexico and await your like the results there. And that I knew someone, for example, back in the day who has kids. So she was like, I can't go back to Mexico, and then how's my husband gonna deal? So she couldn't even apply for a green card because get this country illegally as a kid. Which I'm like, if you're a kid, I think that should be completely overlooked, because it's like you had no say in the matter. I don't think it's right either way, but if we're gonna like, can we at least have a little bit of leeway for people who didn't choose this? Um, and so the because I came here legally, I was able to stay in this country while I awaited my
Really?
results. Yeah. So had I come here illegally, had I crossed the border
That doesn't
illegally,
make sense. That really makes
yeah,
no sense. That if you,
yeah.
oh, yeah,
See, and that's another obstacle, and that's another reason why people don't. Even people who can apply for residency will not apply because of that stipulation.
yeah. I mean, imagine if you came as a baby and then you have to leave to go where? Like go back to a home you've never lived in.
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's does not make sense. It's not. It's outdated. It's whole thing needs to be, yeah. But yeah. So I again, like, that's another reason why, people say, why don't you just do the right way? And it's like, well, even when I can do it the right way, it's not exactly. It's not easy. It's not something you just, snap your fingers and can make happen. You don't think, and that's another thing that always boggled my mind when I was undocumented, when I heard people say, why don't you just do it the right? It's like, you think I like being treated like this? In what world? Some people, and my dad would always listen to conservative radio shows and very right wing radio shows and
Rush
stuff like
Limbaugh.
that. Yeah.
I mean,
um,
why do you think he did that? That would scare me.
because he
Get the shit out of me.
my dad is all about knowledge, so he wanted to know what
Know how the enemy
opposing side right, like, what
Yeah.
are they saying about us? How do they think? How do he wanted to understand the mentality of people who were against us, correct? So he wanted to understand that, not understand it, maybe understand's not the right word, be aware of it, be privy to it, and understand, and so that
prepared.
when prepared, again,
Yeah.
survival, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
if I meet you in person, I meet someone with that mentality in person, I know what I'm dealing with, or I have some sort of idea, and I won't be like knocked off my feet because of it. And so I used to sometimes listen to it with my dad, and it was really hard for me to get through a lot of the times, because people would call in, and oh man, when people agreed on that subject, called in, the amount of terrible thing. And it was really, I just remember one time, so I used to be involved in activism and stuff like that in college, not like a lot, but just like did a couple things, again, living a double life, so I could only do so much. And I had friends who were doing a hunger protest. And I remember listening again with my dad about this. And oh my God, I just remember one of them, someone calling in and saying, that's great. I'm so glad they're doing this. Maybe, they'll do it for long enough so they can die. And I just remember I was like, I can't listen to it, because it's like, these are people I know and love that are undocumented, or putting themselves through a high. And I just remember seeing like the physical, mental thing that a couple of them were dealing with in this protest, this hunger protest. And just to hear someone talk about them like that, I was like, okay, understanding the other side, not understanding, being aware of what the other side is saying, but only to an extent, because sometimes it was too hard to listen to it. It hit too close to home, and that time it did. And I was just like, okay, I'm turning this off. I can't do it. And it's just interesting to me when people say like, why don't you just blah, 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 and stay in your country and blah blah blah. And it's like, do you think people wake up one day and say, oh, God, you know what I want to do? I'm really bored with life. I really just want to go to another country, be treated like crap, never see the people I love again, potentially never see them again, maybe die on the way there, potentially die on the way there. Do you think anyone in their right mind wakes and seeks this? Because sometimes the anger is so potent that I feel like we think that we do this for pleasure, or that this is like we're just bored with life and we want to really annoy you, or I don't know. And so it's hard to listen to the way people talk about it sometimes. And
I think it is
like
interesting, like, how does it affect these people that they're so angry? Like, it doesn't affect them at all.
I
The
don't
people
know.
that hate
I don't know.
undocumented so much, they would
It's
say
like
something like that.
they think that they're taking something away from them, and it's the
Yes, I was
self-centered. And
gonna
it's
say that.
also the people that are like, it's not undocumented people, right? It's illegal aliens. They're not even
Mhm.
people.
Oh
It's
yeah,
all
yeah.
of this verbiage
Right.
that they use to separate themselves.
Mhm.
But do you think there is that narrative that undocumented are taking things from, because
Yeah.
Oh
what
yeah.
things are they
Yeah.
taking? Because
I mean,
one,
it's not.
They're
you can't even compete against the same jobs because you don't even have a social security. So how are you
It's
going to,
right.
not rational.
it's not, I know it's
not
it's not rational, but I
fact-based.
even just want to understand, like you were saying, but yeah,
Yeah.
just even see what is the narrative right now, that it is, what are they taking from these people?
So I know for one thing, right? And again, this is why I'm always telling people, most undocumented people pay taxes. So
Yeah.
that's one of the big lies, because they think that we don't pay taxes, so we are not contributing to the economy, and then we get all this free healthcare,
But no one gets free healthcare.
right. Point number one, right? But somehow we do, or even if they don't think we don't, I don't know, that's this again, in listening to what other people say, they think we don't pay taxes, so we don't contribute to the economy, and then we take away from the economy. We get welfare. That was the funniest things I've ever
How
heard.
do you get
People really,
welfare?
we can't, we
It's
can't.
impossible. You don't even have a social. How do you get welfare?
Exactly. But
Oh.
I came here to not pay taxes, get welfare, get all the free healthcare. I'm living the American dream.
Right.
And
The
I'm having a
American
great
dream
time.
that even Americans don't.
I know.
I go to
They
the
still
UK for that over here.
Exactly. But I don't know. It boggles my mind, because I'm like, have you ever talked? And I know that you haven't. I can't even. It's a rhetorical question, but I want to be like, have you ever talked to an undocumented person? And that's like you're saying, the language is so important. Like I had to even teach friends of mine as I became more, even before I told people that I was undocumented. I heard people that I knew were not friends of mine, that I knew were not against undocumented people, but they were like, oh yeah, illegal people, illegals. And I was like, no, hold on right there. We have to talk about the language. Language is important. And you only know that if you live through your whole life being called an illegal, and what that does to your psyche and your mental health. I was like, wait, what's illegal about me? And alien, like, to me, I was just talking to someone about it. It's like the fact that, okay, I finally made it. I have a green card. What are you now? oh, you're a resident alien. It's like, wait, what? So I went from illegal to an alien. So I can't, when will this stop? You know, the language is so important. Language is used as a weapon, you know, and it can dehumanize you. And so I remember even, and I know illegal is so easy to throw around. So I had, and I'm so glad, I think social media has helped, because back, I feel old saying this, but back in my day when social wasn't as, you know, although like Facebook was the only thing, but it was only if you had, if you were in college. And back in the day, like there wasn't a conversation about what it meant to be a dreamer, what it means to be when DACA wasn't even a thing. So being in the shadows was so important because there was not, people weren't educated the way they are now. And I'm not saying where it's Mecca now and everyone is treating undocumented people great, no, but I'm saying there was so much more ignorance back then about the subject. So there was so much more fear and so much more ambivalence of like, is that person just said illegals are this, but they didn't say anything bad about us, but they said, they used the word illegal. So, you know, but it was because they just didn't know that you don't call people that, because that's dehumanizing. You're stripping someone of their humanity with your own words, which I know it's not something you realize, or maybe you even think has an effect on someone, but it does. And it adds to the larger system of the structure of how undocumented people are treated. Even if you're okay with undocumented people, but you calling them illegals, right away we go, oh no, okay, staying away from that person, you know? So it's so intricate. And I know social media, there's a lot of downsides to it, but the one thing I can attest to is in sort of being able to bring awareness to this situation and the issue, and what is the language for it, and what are people going through because of this, you know? And again, I've thought about this book, which I'm so glad I did. I think it was through social media. And again, it depends on who you follow and how your information, that's how your information is filtered, but still. Yeah, language is important, incredibly important. So.
Really true. Wow. Well, thank you so much. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
you talking to us for so
Oh
long.
my God. Thank you.
So, what did you think of the episodes? Part 1 and part 2.
The plural episodes. I mean, it's always weird to see yourself, so that part's weird, of course. But aside from that, yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground, which I thought was good. I was like, okay, there was just as it was interesting as I was watching it. I was like, oh, but mention this, and then eventually either you guys would ask a question or I would naturally go into it, and I was like, okay, good, that was mentioned. That was covered. But in general, I did kind of want to want to correct something that I said, specifically about immigrants, undocumented immigrants, and taxes, where I was talking to my parents about it, and just growing up, I know that they definitely would always get less than they were supposed to for their refund, but I was under the impression that they didn't get anything, and came to find out that they actually, when my sister was a dependent for them, because she's a U.S. citizen, they would get something for her, you know, as a stipend to because she's a citizen and she's underage. It was still not what they would have gotten had they had a actual social security number. And now, as my sister's no longer a dependent, obviously, because she's way older, they still get a little bit, but it's like very little in comparison. And I, in my mind, I had just spoken to a friend who's undocumented, and he said like, oh no, like I had to pay, and I don't get any money back. So I kind of had that fresh in my mind. So it might not be the case for everyone. I think some people do get a little bit, but it's still, it's not as much as you would, as much of a refund as you would if you have a social security number, and your taxes contribute to these programs that you can never benefit from, right? So whether it's welfare, Medicare, Medicaid, all these programs that are supposed to help you if you are low income, which a vast majority of undocumented immigrants are. But again, you pay into them, but you don't get to.
Yeah, so you're looking at people that are paying decades and decades of taxes, and they're not really getting back anything for their taxes.
Right.
So it's like the opposite of them mooching off the system, which is kind of like the myth of the
Yes.
undocumented American.
The
Yeah.
myth. Yes. And I think that's important. I think that was the larger point I wanted to make, that because people do think that undocumented immigrants don't pay. And I can't say that 100% do, because I don't have, I know that I'm sure some don't, but a vast majority do. And I think that's just important to understand, for people to know that it's, when they say people are coming here to take from them, it's like, no, people want to contribute. They want to be, it makes them proud. I just can speak for my parents, it gives you pride to say, no, I contribute to this country.
Yeah,
So,
you're deserving, and then they want to make sure that they will be deserving of citizenship
right.
if ever the law changes.
Right. And it shows good moral character. This shows, like you said, decades of paying taxes. And it shows that, no, I want to be an addition. I don't want to take away. I want to give. So, so I hope
Yeah.
people, are more aware of that, and I think like I said, social media has helped, and there's more awareness, and we're not fully there though, but hopefully we can spread the
Yeah,
word.
we're not fully there, because this month, actually, a judge ruled
Yes.
to overturn DACA, as they claimed, a few states sued and claimed that DACA was against the unconstitutional or something. It was like something like it's
This is an executive order. Yeah.
because it was what? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Because of it being an executive order, that it was unconstitutional for the president to decide to implement a program. Yeah.
Yeah. So all these years later, and then that judge actually ruled in favor of that. So now Biden's coming out and saying that he will, I guess, contest that, or they will, but it is a setback in terms of the fact that they could even rule that. And it means that it's like constantly under attack.
Right.
And then the other thing that I guess we should update is that Biden is saying that he's going to look for a path to citizenship for DACA recipients in the reconciliation bill, which basically means bullshit. Like, that's something that won't pass then, because it will have to jump through all these hoops with a parliamentarian, etc. But I think the good news of that is that it's kind of like saying, okay, so we know that the public wants some movement. Like, there's the calculation is the Democratic Party thinks that a huge amount of their constituents want some movement on this idea of like DACA recipients getting a path to citizenship. So they're sort of signaling, like virtue signaling, that they might do that, even if it's not actually tangibly going to happen the way that they're claiming. You know, so it's like, it is good news in that they're aware that there's like public.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even though it's kind of bullshit what they're doing.
Right. And I think it's such a and I was listening to an immigration activist, sort of breaking down what this new ruling does for it's still. So if you are DACA currently and already are in the system, you can still renew. So basically it cuts off people from applying. So if you never applied for the program, you can't, unfortunately you can't anymore. If your application was in progress, this is the part that I remember being like, if it was in progress but they didn't get to it, then you still, and it's your first time applying, then you are still excluded. And it's really unfair, because again, and I remember last episode we talked about it, like immigration is very backed up, especially with coronavirus. Like, that's not people's fault, and they lose out on that money. I don't know what that is now, but they lose out on the money, and so that's incredibly unfair. But the way she was talking about it, she's like, we're pushing for the Reconciliation Act. We're pushing for something to come from it, because we do have a majority, a Democratic majority in Congress. So this is the time this
I
is the
hope this-
momentum we need. And again,
Yeah.
it's like I mentioned that in the episode that I'm very jaded about it. So I'm not
Yeah.
holding
Well,
it.
I'm just very suspicious about it because they put so much power into the parliamentarians' hands, which is like ridiculously stupid. That's just sort of an excuse for things that they don't want to pass, but they don't
Right.
want to look like they don't want to pass it.
Fine,
So
yeah.
that's what makes me think it's not going to happen, because the
Right.
parliamentarian is just, they can fire that parliamentarian at any point. So
Right.
it's a bit like it just sounds like an excuse for them to, because they don't really care too much about the issue.
I know.
Which
And we've been,
sucks, but
it's a carrot that's been dangled in front of the Latinx community for decades. And like I said, it's dangled. I am now a citizen. I'm very, very happy to say that since the last episode I was a resident,
oh
then
yeah,
since I became a citizen.
wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Of all dates, on Cinco de Mayo, I became a citizen. So,
Oh my God. So did you have to take the test? Like
I mean, it was,
the test.
yeah, right. It was just like an interview. So they can ask
Oh,
10 questions, and if you get as soon as you get 6 right answers, they stop because you don't have
were
to
they
get
like,
6.
I just wonder if there's 10 questions I could answer. Like what? What sort of, do
Yeah.
you remember any of them?
Yeah, sometimes it's the wording of it, so there was one question. I mean, they're pretty simple, but it's about the founding fathers, like when
Uh-oh.
it's so simple. I mean, you just look it up on it's, I have 100 questions online.
And then you have to,
And so do you go off of that? So you have, as long as you memorize the answers of those 100 questions, you're good to go. And they're a lot very simple, like who's the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi,
okay, yeah, I know
who's
that.
who's the commander-in-chief of the military, the
Oh, I
president,
don't know that.
like,
Ooh,
yeah,
who's that? That's the president?
the president. Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my God, that's not good, because that makes me
believe
very
in you.
uncomfortable.
You've memorized, trust me, you've memorized many things in your life, so you can definitely.
So I can definitely do 100 questions.
Yeah, and they only pulled 10, right? And as soon as you
Yeah.
get to the sixth right answer, then you're like, okay, good to go. We're
Cool.
stopping here.
Oh my gosh,
So it
congratulations.
was great. Thank you.
Wow.
So it was a very and it was definitely, the ceremony was different because of COVID. It was outside with masks and distance and all of that, which is, expected. And I felt very safe. But now I'm a citizen and now I can vote. And so like, what the point I'm trying to make is that that's the carrot that's being dangled in front of us. So people like me, people like my sister, who's been able to vote, who are obviously need immigration reform to happen. These politicians keep playing that card. Unfortunately, that's where we're gonna go towards, but then it's disappointing when nothing comes of it. And so
yeah, because it's really hard in a two-party system. Like, we know the Republicans are way worse on this. And even though Biden has not done what he's promised necessarily, there've been like one or two things that he has done, which is like slightly better. Like one of the things that there was 100-day moratorium on deportations. Okay, so it's only 100 days, but still, that would have been something. And then the other thing is he was reversing some of the deportations that happened, or they were going to go through all the cases. So of the DACA deportations, or so those are like little things that are slightly better still, and at least you don't have this. So you have one party that's going, here's the carrot, and we're so great on this, right? But our hands are tied. Like that's kind of the Democratic Party. And then you have the Republican Party that's just straight out hostile, like get out, don't come here. Although Kamala Harris also said don't come, but like, there is, so that's like, it's a little confusing when Democrats go off script like that. But you have one party that's extremely hostile to immigration, and then you have one party, like actually a Republican came out last week to actually say that he wanted to pause all immigration for 10 years. Which is, and we're not even talking about illegal immigration.
Yeah. The process. I'm sorry.
Just immigration. And obviously it's not okay. It's not to say that's a realistic thing, because obviously 10 years is a very long time, and like to pause out, it's just a ridiculous thing to say. But the fact that he can say it is more of indication of where the party's at. So that's what you're in between, some like two very bad choices.
Right.
And I don't know if the Green Party, I mean, doesn't seem that realistic to.
No, it's not. It's a party system all the way.
Yeah, it's a two. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I do think that we should vote Green Party just to say to the Democratic Party, take us seriously, you know, take us seriously, or we're not going to vote for you. Because now they're like, you have nowhere to go.
Right.
You know, I'm saying this as if I can vote, by the way.
Hey, I get it. Man, it's a new thing for me. So I'm like, oh yeah, I can. Oh, I can vote. But be voting for the first time in my adult life. So that's gonna be.
That's so exciting.
Tricky. Yeah, thank you. So, but again, like I said, yeah, it has to be. They have that. I'm running after that carrot. You know, they have something. You know, they're holding something hostage, so to speak. And so we'll see what happens. But I know that there is a semblance of hope for the Reconciliation Act, for something to be done in that using that path, but I'm not holding my breath, and we'll see what happens. And I hope Joe Biden really does something about the DACA decision, because that is oh man, that's such a hard hit.
Yeah,
such a hard hit.
And in July too, I maybe because I wasn't following it too much, I wasn't really expecting that. No.
Yeah, that was I can't say I was. I mean, I don't know, it's so hard. You're just so used to not getting your hopes, and I mean, I'm very lucky that I'm not in that situation anymore, but it's still, man, it's just, it hits hard.
So now that you've watched it again, is there anything that you feel you wanted to add, or just any other things that you were like, oh man, I should have mentioned this?
Yeah, I mean, besides the tax stuff, I'm trying to think if there was anything else. I think, like I said, we covered a lot of ground. I think one thing I want to add really is I want to encourage people to read the book, The Undocumented Americans. I really, actually, I just gave it to my sister-in-law recently, because I follow Karla, and
did she watch our episode?
I know, right? I doubt it. I'm sure she gets so many requests and things, and she's very prolific, and as she should.
No, I meant your sister-in-law.
Oh, her. I was like, Karla. God, that would.
Karla might be a little.
I don't think she's gonna watch it. I think she's too busy. She has a fabulous life. She's too busy, or at least I'm saying that.
You should listen to it, but
yeah, I know, right? I don't think she has yet. But so I gave her. I was actually, Karla I follow her on Instagram, and she gave out like a signed copy, and I was able to get a signed copy from her.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had an extra copy, so I gave it to my sister-in-law, and I hope, and I know I'm going to ask her how this just happened. So I know she hasn't finished reading it, my sister-in-law. And I just was wondering, I just want people to read this. I want it reads like a novel. If you're not a person who likes to read, I know that like a lot of people are like, I don't like to read books, and I completely understand, but it's such an easy, fantastic read. I think it's such a beautiful portrait of so many different people's stories, and told in such an authentic way. And you're just sucked right into the world. I personally could have read it in one sitting, because it was so riveting, and I've lived through it, and I still learned new things as someone who has lived through this and learned and felt identified with a lot of their stories and learn new things. So that's the main thing. I want people to read this book and tell others about it, and because I think that is how we spread awareness, and I'm glad people are more on board and supporting the cause, but we also support it with our money, right? So if you're buying this book, if you're showing that this is showing publishing houses that this is the material we want,
Right.
and we're interested in, and in the process, you're enriching your own knowledge in this topic.
I feel exactly the same way about our interviews with you. Well, our 2-part interview with you. Like, I just want everyone to watch it. I feel that anyone, I mean, I learned so much from it, and you're so open and vulnerable, and I think it was just such a lovely honor to have interviewed you or talked to you about your experiences.
I feel very, very fortunate to have had the opportunity to be given a platform to even talk about it. And watching it, I was like, oh my God, this really, like it ended up being a little bit of an interview about me. And I hope
that was what was so special about it. In my
Thank
opinion.
you. I felt a little like, oh man, I talked a lot, but at the same time, I hope that it was a way that I wanted to, and I don't, and I mentioned, I was for so many years did not talk about this, that now that I feel that I can talk about it without fear, I feel like it's my responsibility to shout it from the rooftops. And if it helps in any way, if it moves things or changes someone's perspective or adds to their worldview about it or whatever it is. And so I was so scared for so long. I lived in such a place of fear for so long that I wish I hadn't, but I can't go back and change it, but I can only change my present. And so I have to share it. And I'm happy to talk about it with anyone who wants to talk about it. And again, mental health as well. I for so many years, I was so ashamed of dealing with these issues. And the older you get, the more you realize that the shame's going to slow you down. It's going to, the moment you talk about it, the weight is a little lighter. And it's funny because you don't feel that way when you're going through it. You feel like it's going to get more difficult if you talk about it, but that's complete opposite. So that's another thing I like to encourage people to talk about their mental health. And I know it's a process. I know for me, it's been years in the making. So I know it's a process, but I hope people can read about it, the book, and take into account their own mental health, because I think it's so important, and do whatever it takes to make sure that they're okay, and that and mental health is maintenance. It's not just like,
it's not a switch or a magic pill. Yeah. Right.
And it's not, and that we all need to take mental health into account. I don't think you need to have this a few breakdowns to be considered someone that needs to take mental health into account. I think every day it's all maintenance, just the way you brush your teeth, the way you go to the gym, the way we eat well, to make sure that our physical health is well, that our hygiene is taken care of. The same thing needs to be accounted for our mental health, our mental hygiene, so that's the other thing I'd like to really emphasize.
Yeah. So please, anybody watching this, please share it. Please like the video. Please, I don't know what else you can do, but let's get more people watching it. And also all the links, there are like a whole ton of links in our link tree that are resources that you recommended, Mariel. Like, so the suicide hotlines, the domestic abuse hotlines, but also like resources for the Latinx community. And also places that where like potentially could donate to, I suppose, if we talked about that.
And I want to, I might want to add a resource if we have time. So
absolutely. Add more research. Okay, cool. So there's a whole bunch of resources on that Google Doc. So hopefully that will be helpful. Thank you so much, Mariel.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks.
The Ignoramus's Guide to Surviving Humanity is available as a podcast on Spotify and Amazon Music.
You can also like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube. And if you want to help us grow, then you can become a patron on Patreon. And that's it, right? I think that's it.
Yeah.